views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hello and welcome to Open BxRx, BronxNet's special coverage providing you the latest information that matters to you during COVID-19, the coronavirus, and now through social justice actions and civil unrest happening nationally and here in the Bronx. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and today is Tuesday, July 7th. Coming up, we'll discuss how the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce has continued to support minority and women-owned businesses through COVID-19. Then we'll chat with the founder of Nueva Yorkinos about how the digital NYC Latinx archive is also an educational platform for Black Latinx history. After that, we'll learn more about Black Disabled Lives Matter, a movement founded by an artist raising awareness on the impact of police brutality on Black disabled lives. And Asymptomatic Systematic is a new exhibition presented by Infoco Inc., featuring some incredible work by local artists and their experience with COVID-19. We'll speak with the curator and an artist later on. So please stay tuned. Open BxRx starts now. Welcome to Open BxRx on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, inviting you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Before and through COVID-19, the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce has been supporting and helping local small businesses, and especially women-owned businesses, navigate these hard times, understanding phase openings, the process of PPP loans, and more. Joining us to discuss is Quenia Abreu, the president of NY Women's Chamber of Commerce. Quenia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure.
And just to start, can we learn a little bit about the NYWCC?
Yes, well, we are the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, and what we do really is help our women start and grow successful businesses. So our mission is to really economically empower women, and especially our women entrepreneurs. That's what we do, and we do it through just the entire city of New York and some other parts of New York State.
Right. And I'm interested to learn in the ways that you've been organizing and navigating through these hard times. Tell us about the ways the NYC Women's Chamber of Commerce helped women-owned businesses in the community through COVID-19.
Well, wow. The tough times, I gotta say, it just came, and it's like it hit it was just a hurricane that just hit, and even though we knew that we were dealing with the virus and it was coming slowly, we didn't realize how that was just going to change our lives so drastically in just one moment, and especially our small businesses, because when that order came from the governor to just close down, it was devastating. It was devastating. I remember talking to the beauty salon owners and having to tell them that they have to close their business, and it was indefinitely. And I'll tell you, it was terrible. It was tough. And so what we have been doing, we started working remotely March 17th. And we just continue to work. We change, a little bit, because what we ended up doing was becoming a center that was just dealing with, with COVID-19 and everything that the small businesses were going through, especially the applying for funding. Every funding, every grant, every loan that came our way, we immediately notified them. We helped them apply for. So we became really almost a recovery center for the small businesses since March 17.
Right. And before that, there were disparities and challenges that minority and women-owned businesses were already facing that the NYWCC was already addressing. Can you tell us about some of those issues?
Yes, well, we do a lot. I mean, we service all women entrepreneurs, but we have a large membership that it's comprised of women of color,
Mhm.
especially. And there are many challenges, just in general, that women face, but especially women of color. And one of those challenges has always been access to capital, not being able to obtain the funding that they need. And that was even before the pandemic. So imagine during the pandemic what they have to deal with. And it's very difficult. And one of the things that we discovered while trying to help them apply for funding, especially with the PPP loan, is all the the challenges, all the shortcomings that our women entrepreneurs face, especially in as I said before, minorities, women of color, is the not having people, not having employees, for instance, on the payroll, being very small, being a solopreneurs, as we refer to them, or being just two people, not having the accountants that they need. We went through this whole thing where women were trying to find where their accountants were because they didn't have the documentation that they needed to apply for the loans. It just became more and more difficult and more apparent when we were working with them what challenges that they're faced, not only through this pandemic but throughout. Something that we're now trying to work with to help them face and address those challenges that they have. But accounting, the payroll, record keeping, you name it, and it really became apparent. It became more of a challenge when it came time to apply for the PPP loan and other sources of funding.
Right, that was my next question, Kenya. So, as you said, women have always had a hard time accessing the capital funding from the city, or in that regard. So, I wanted to get your thoughts on the facts that many women-owned businesses also face a lack of access to the Paycheck Protection Program and other financial assistance. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, one of the things is the banking relationship. And one of the things that we saw, for instance, the first round, was that none of our business owners were getting the loans. All the loans were going to major companies. And when we spoke to our small business owners, they didn't even they have bank accounts because they do. They are the clients of banks, of all the banks that we have seen in our community, the JP Morgan Chases, the Bank of Americas, the TD banks, all of them. But they didn't even have a relationship with those banks. They didn't even have somebody that they can call and say, hey, I need to apply for this loan. Can you help me? So that was one of the problems that we identified. And then when it came time, finally, when the banks became more friendly, I would say, or forced to become more friendly to our small business owners, that they were still not giving them the importance. They didn't recognize the importance of the small businesses to them. And we have to remind them, like, hey, these are your clients, you got to help them out, because guess what, if they have to close their door, you're going to lose those clients. We're not only losing our small businesses and the jobs that they provide, but you're also losing them as a client. So those was one of the issues, the lack of relationship with the banks, and the banks not responding to them as they should have from the beginning.
Wow. And now that NYC is approaching phase three, many of these businesses are reopening. What are some of the fears and the hopes that you're hearing expressed by the women who own businesses in the city?
Wow. I'll tell you, I've been very involved with the reopening. As you probably know, I sit on the advisory board for the governor, the New York Forward, and we have been working with the businesses since phase one, but phase two, really big in when it comes to small businesses, because in phase two you find a lot of the beauty salon owners, for instance. As you know, there's so many of them throughout the city. So we have been working heavily with them, providing the training, helping them with the protocol, help them with the guidelines to implement all those guidelines and protocols. Not easy. They're being, for instance, the beauty salons, nail salons that now are set to open in phase three, they're being treated almost as a clinic.
Yeah. I see
They're
like
being,
these glass encasements
yes,
and stuff.
Yes, they have to implement those. So it really cuts into their day-to-day operation. It cuts into their ability to really grow their business, to see as many clients as they can, because right now they can only have their operation as 50% of the operation, which means also that they can only have 50% of the clients come in. And that's a lot. And then when you look at like nails, for instance, that open on phase 3, this is their time. This is their busiest time. Everybody gets their nails done in the summer. And so they're not going to be able to do as much as they usually do during the summertime. And it's going to be heavily regulated, because that's the reality. But what I say to them all the time is, you were closed, we were closed, you were closed for 3 months. So, we are open now. We're open, and we just have to adapt as much as we can until things go back to normal.
Absolutely. And I know one of the ways that the New York City Women's Chamber helps other owners and business owners get back and adapt to these things, the new norm, as you want to call it, is that you have upcoming virtual workshops. And I just want to learn about what your hopes are for women business owners and entrepreneurs, and what you hope they will gain from these workshops.
Well, what we are hoping, as I mentioned to you, we're doing the training about the guidelines and the protocols and all of that. But we're also doing the training about the PPP loan, the recovery loan. So what we are hoping that they're going to gain is that they're going to be more prepared, that they're going to be more ready. That's something that this is a horrible time, but it's also a time to learn. We have, we have an opportunity now, especially as small businesses, to get everything in order, to take it as a learning experience as well, and to get ready, to have everything in place, because we're going to have a lot of resources still coming their way. We're going to have more resources. The city has put out resources. The state has put out resources. We have corporations that are also coming out with loans and grants, but they have to be ready. They have to be ready to be able to apply. And that's one of the things that we are helping them do with these workshops and these seminars.
Thank you, Quenia. And our viewers don't know, but before our interview, you had the face covering on, the full face. You're still out on the forefront. You're still out here helping minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. So thank you for your work. I just want to give the resource to our viewers. How can women business owners get in touch and learn more about NYWCC?
They can call us. They can call us at 212-491-9640. Again, 212-491-9640. And they can also get in touch with us through our website at nywcc.org.
Thank you for your time, Quenia.
Thank you. Always my pleasure.
Of course. Folks, to find out about resources and more information for small women-owned businesses, please visit nywcc.org. And you can also follow NY Women's Chamber on Instagram for upcoming events. Open BxRx will be right back. Welcome back to Open BxRx. Nueva Yorkinos is a beloved digital archive dedicated to the OG Latino NYC community. For the past year, it's transformed as an archive to an educational platform on Latinidad and recognition of Black Latinx history. Joining us now to discuss is founder of Nueva Yorkinos, Djali Alessandra Brown-Cepeda. Djali, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. The first thing, of course, is for people who might not be familiar with Nueva Yorkinos. Can you just give us an introduction about it?
Of course. So Nueva Yorkinos is a digital archive, as you said, that was founded to document and preserve New York City Latinx culture through family photos and stories.
Thank you. And how does the process work? How do people submit and who can participate in Nueva Yorkinos?
So the submission process is I only accept photos taken before 2005. They have to be taken within the 5 boroughs, and you just have to be Latino, Latina, Latinx. And it's pretty simple. You know, I wanted to make sure that this platform was here to be open for everyone, that was here to be accessible to everybody. And so that's why there aren't many guidelines per se, but taken before 2005, you have to be Latino, Latina, Latinx, and it has to be taken in New York City within the 5 boroughs.
I also wanted to delve into the importance of utilizing your Nueva Yorkinos platform to provide education, solidarity, and highlight the Black Latinx history. Can you tell me more about that?
So my mom is Dominican. My father is African American and Indigenous. And because of my background, my multiculturalism, Black and Latinx solidarity is just something that I was born out of, right? And that I'm here because of that solidarity. But I realize that, you know, within our community, sometimes we hide behind our nationalism and we don't want to have these conversations. We hide behind our flags. And although our countries are so beautiful and our countries have such amazing histories, we have to understand that our histories were shaped by colonialism. And we are here because of colonialism, just like in the continental United States, just like in La República Dominicana, Colombia, Brazil, right? So because we're not having these conversations very openly within our community, I found that it was very important that there's this platform that I created. I'm an Afro-Latina, very proud Afro-Latina. So when are we ever able to have these conversations, right? And facilitate these conversations. But more importantly, that there is a platform and there are, you know, followers. And so because these conversations aren't happening so often in our homes or in our communities or in our schools, why not, you know, present these things that are very foreign to some people, these conversation, you know, starters? Why not present it on a platform where everyone can see it, you know? And whether or not they like it is one thing, but it's important. And as they say, the conversations that are the hardest to have are the ones that are the most important to have. So.
That is so true. And thank you for you know, using your platform to amplify this and our stories as well. It's so important to have these discussions. On your clip, Las Vidas Negras Importan, and the importance of having discussions on solidarity with Black lives in our multilingual, multi-generational homes, how have followers reacted to this? I know that you said earlier, I mean, just now you said sometimes they don't like it, but it is what it is. Like, what have you been hearing back from the Latinx community about these posts?
So it's interesting, right? Because I have a lot of love. I have a lot of support because everything that I do with this page is out of love. Everything that I do out of, you know, archiving, sharing these educational tools, it's not to make people feel bad. It's not to point the finger, but it's to say, hey, you know, like, here's what's happening. And maybe you weren't aware, right? Or maybe you're aware, but your family member is not aware because you're second generation and they just, you know, they're first generation. Or so we have so many complexities happening within our households. And sometimes I get, you know, some hate from folks. People don't want to have these conversations. I've received very anti-Black messaging. I've received very nationalistic comments. And anytime that I'm, you know, faced with these sort of things, I just, you know, delete it or I block the person. But unfortunately, you know, it does take a toll sometimes because you're like, wow, you know, I'm trying to be here and I'm trying to provide these educational tools really for us to advance, you know, and for us to elevate our lives and to show that, you know, these issues that are happening here in the US, these are happening in our homelands as well. Like, this is not the Black Lives Matter movement. What it is fighting for, what we are fighting for is not only in the United States. It's for Black lives everywhere, period, punto, right? So Black lives in DR, Black lives in Colombia. And so unfortunately, you know, some people don't want to have those conversations because you have a lot of, you know, assimilation, or you have, you know, fear for having these conversations and, you know, bringing up these topics. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it makes you look at your own self differently. Sometimes it makes you, you know, feel weird, you know, to benefit from a system that you're not aware of, right? A lot of like white passing Latinx folk. I've received a lot of, you know, hate from people like that. It's been very complicated. However, because it's been overwhelmingly, you know, met with support and love, I hope to continue doing what I'm doing, but it does get difficult at times.
please don't stop, and you have the backup of the community. If we can help in any way, I feel like a way would be for us to engage in these discussions in our own homes and take that inspiration from education that you're providing on your platform to our homes as well. So thank you, and please don't stop doing it. Take your breaks, of course, but please don't. The next thing, Djali, I wanted to discuss was many of the submissions that you've shared have also shared stories of resilience and hardship. And I noticed that some submissions are also homages to Latinx lives lost during the COVID-19 pandemic. You read every single submission. What does it mean to you to receive and share these personal and powerful stories during this time?
Well, just like a year and change ago when I started the project, I truly still can't believe that people feel so vulnerable, and that there has been this community that this platform has created amongst ourselves, right? And people feel like they want to share, and people feel like they want to talk, and people feel like they want to be seen, and they want to be heard, and they want to be acknowledged. And unfortunately, as people of color, as disenfranchised folks living in communities that are redlined, where our school systems suck, education isn't really doing anything for us. We have, lack of access to adequate food. We have police states, right? Because of like all of those societal pressures that tell us every day and remind us every day that we don't matter, right? It's so important that I'm able to, through Nueva Yorkinos, create this sort of, platform for people to be like, no, we do matter, and we always have mattered. It's very humbling, that people feel like they can be themselves, unapologetically, uncensored on this page. And so it's so lovely. It makes me very sad because, of course, like I want to help and I want to do and I want to provide and I want to, take it offline too and, be there in IRL, like in real life, right? And move from the URL. But unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but now, like the power of social media, it's been very beautiful. And every submission, just like from the jump when I started a year ago, every submission that I receive, I feel like is a blessing, that there are that many more people, that many more stories, that many more photos. So.
Right. For me, personally, Nueva Yorkinos is such a healing space. And every time I dig into my picture box, I find a new story to tell amongst my family, no matter how many times I've seen the photos before. And I'm always so happy to read everyone's submission. So I thank you for that. I laugh, I cry, and I just feel through social media because of your page. So I thank you for creating the space for us. Something else I wanted to bring up was 2020 has been already a highly documented year, and someday in the future will be in the past, of course. With so many people taking photos on the forefront, what are your hopes for the Nueva Yorkinos page as it continues to grow and looking back at it when it's like 20 years old, right?
Yeah, I mean, on the smaller level, I would love to, create more media out of Nueva Yorkinos, whether that be film, whether that be a series, whether that be a podcast. I would love to have a book, like a series of coffee table books. But more importantly, my long-term goal, I would love to open a museum, because we need a place here in New York City concretely that represents us and represents our resiliency and our determination and our willpower, just like the Chinese American Museum started as something very small and the Tenement Museum started as something very small. Nueva Yorkinos is something small, but I hope that I can have a museum one day where we feel seen, and we feel heard and we see ourselves represented in the photos that line the walls. Because so often, museums and art in general is very whitewashed. And so I hope to be able to create that space where we feel represented and reflected.
Let's put that out into the universe. It's going to happen. You're going to have that museum. One last thing, Djali, before you go, is a message for the NYC Latinx community during these times from Nueva Yorkinos.
My message is stay strong, stay resilient, and we need to start to access all of our ancestral knowledge and ancestral wisdom that flows within our veins. We are here because of our ancestral resiliency. So often we hear, that we are victims of our colonial pain and our colonial trauma, and that we've inherited that. And while that is true, we have also inherited generations of strength. And I think that we need to tap into that, and we can never forget it.
Thank you so much, Djali, for joining us today. One day we will all dance together, laugh together again in person and in community again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, please follow at Nueva Yorkinos on Instagram to get connected and learn more about the platform. Open BxRx will be right back.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others.
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Welcome back to Open BxRx. According to research, almost half of the people who die at the hands of police have some kind of disability. What does this say about the lack of police training and sensitivity towards Black disabled lives? In order to bring awareness to disability solidarity, one artist has founded a movement called Black Disabled Lives Matter. Joining us now to discuss is Jennifer White Johnson, art activist and designer. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I didn't start the movement. The movement has been like in place for decades. I really just wanted to respond in an act of creative resistance and an act of solidarity to just put together a symbol and put together like art and graphics to continue to galvanize and like increase dialogue and increase unity. That was really like where I fit into all of this.
Thank you, Jen, for clearing that up. And my bad for messing that up in the beginning. So I just want to learn about you and your work and the Black Disabled Lives Matter movement and the solidarity graphic that we see in protests in some places, which you created.
Yeah, so I think that for a long time, just within like my own personal artistic walk and accepting my own disability, I really had to figure out like what are some ways that I can continue to kind of be a part of like a much bigger movement and to continue to like observe and to converse with other folks that are like me, right? But that are viewed as disposable, viewed without value. So when I think of like disability movement, I think of influencers that have so much thought and can activate so much change and conversation, like Leroy Moore, Crip Hop Nation, Imani Barberin, Carches and Spice, Crip Camp. So many folks who have really spent a lot of time talking and being able to add so much to the conversation. And that's just like a few that come to mind because like I follow so many. Talia Lewis, and just folks who really help to kind of activate the conversation. So when we're talking about Black lives and Black lives mattering and Black lives being looked at as like animals, as being disposable, we really can't have the conversation without involving folks who have disabilities, folks who don't necessarily feel like society is accessible to them and in media and literature and like our everyday like existence. And so a lot of the artwork that I create really is about helping to bring visibility, and it's really about helping to honor and to bring so much tribute to Black disabled people. My son, he's 7 years old and he's autistic, and I really want for him to grow up in a world feeling like the world respects me as I am. The world respects my humanity. I'm not necessarily viewed as like disposable, someone who's not valued in society, someone who can't, make change.
Thank you, Jen. And congratulations on the upcoming Black Disabled Lives Matter mural. Can you tell us more about it and what it represents?
So I'm partnering with the National Alliance of Multicultural Disabled Advocates. Carrie Gray and Justice Shorter are two amazing DC-based Black disability folks. And we have a team, and we're going to be commemorating the ADA 30th anniversary. And many organizations and many folks around the community on a national level are coming together to hold virtual programming to just honor, disability justice and disability culture, and to address, certain things that still need to change. that still need to be really like thought about. I mean, there are certain aspects of accessibility that we can highlight and that we can say, hey, like we're doing it, but there are still other aspects of maternal health care that need to be addressed. Uh, you know, web accessibility, making sure that people feel like they're included in the conversation when it comes to like digital space, along with physical space, and a lot of that has to do with how they feel like they're being treated or valued within like their own spaces in general. Like Mariah Person, who's another amazing autistic artist and dancer. And, she talks a lot about like reimagining spaces, reimagining inclusive experiences for Black autistic people. And, making sure that they can come into a space and be encouraged to like hold on to tactile materials that they can, that have like a nice, like stimulating, like, experience for them, like stim toys. And so I really enjoy Black disabled bodies that really help to ask the question of how can I reimagine and innovate spaces and conversations and dialogue and art. And to me, that's what the mural represents. It's like honoring um, folks from all different aspects of 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 their narratives, but then also honoring those who are no longer with us, who've been taken from us, who've been victimized by police brutality, by injustice, simply because they were disabled. Whether or not their disabilities were being valued within their own communities, whether or not like their values were being understood by their communities. And so the mural itself is very hard to conceptualize because it's celebratory, but then it's also like an opportunity to help tribute and to memorialize like these folks.
And when we talk about joining the conversation on disability justice, can we just define exactly what that is and what the challenges are with ableism and race when it comes to policing?
Yeah, and a lot of it comes with, again, like a lack of understanding, or basically putting disability in a box, and not realizing that there's a much larger conversation. And I'm not by all means an expert on disability justice. I'm really an artist that really wants to help galvanize community. So there are a lot of folks who've written a lot about it. Like Crip Camp is a really beautiful documentary that really breaks down the narrative of folks who were able to organize, to act, to lobby, and to make sure that disabled people feel heard. And so the disability justice culture has been around for decades. People have been coming together for a long time to kind of make sure that they feel like they have a community, and that they feel like they're valued, and accepted. And so justice just means that we have, equitable opportunities, and and not necessarily being able to, be in a workplace and feel valued. But it's like, okay, well, how do you provide the accommodations that I need, like in the workplace, in the classroom, like if I'm, a student, that's struggling, with certain accommodations being made, whether I have low visibility, or whether I have, ADHD, or whether, they're autistic. What are some accommodations that can be put in place? Like what are the different ways that these institutions that are meant to uplift these communities, what are ways that they're continuing to amplify folks with disabilities? And these are conversations that are being had all over. And being ableist is saying, oh, like, well, you're lazy, and you're not really studying, and that's why you're not doing well in class. You're not that, like, it's not that hard, and all you had to do is just do X, Y, and Z. Everyone else is doing it, why can't you do it? That's a very ableist mindset, like assuming that everyone's learning style and everyone's approach is the same and should be treated the same. Being anti-ableist is making sure that amazing person feels like they're valued, and that they have the opportunity to feel like they're respected because of their disability, and when we talk about like anti-racism, making sure that Black and brown, autistic students, Black and brown disabled students have the same equitable opportunities that their white disabled students have, and I've been able to kind of, and a lot of that stems from how they're viewed in society.
Something you're doing to move away from that stigma is the Autistic Joy movement with your son. So you have a photo zine on your website. Can you just tell us about that and what this project means to you?
Yeah, and and as we're talking about, joy in the midst of so much sadness and heaviness, I think about like narratives like Stefan Watts, who was 15. He was autistic. He came from a very supportive family who really loved him and encouraged the community to like accept him as much as possible, but you had a lot of the neighborhood and a lot of law enforcement who needed to handle like his particular difference in their own way, and so that happened in 2012, and my son was born in 2012, and he was diagnosed when he was 3, in 2015. So I hadn't really done a lot of research at that time to see what the disproportion was in diagnoses, and even in terms of like violence, like what the percentages were of Black disabled, Black autistic folks, like how often were they being ostracized and being attacked just for their race and also for their disability. And so after my son was diagnosed, instantly I was like, either we can view this as how society wants us to view this, as like a sickness, as an illness, as a disorder, and that we need to quickly like normalize our kids, and they have to like learn how to adapt and to assimilate to like culture and this culture of compliance, and they need to be able to like to function out in like the normal world as like a normal person. And I saw a lot of negative perceptions and a lot of really like heavy undertones of ableism and anti-racism. And then I just really wanted to create a counter narrative. I really wanted to help create and amplify, like, this is what Black parenting, this is what representation can look like when we just uplift and accept our Black autistic kids. And my son is a very joyful person. I mean, like, he looks weird, like when he's crying. He just doesn't even look right. He looks like an old man, and it's like, and he doesn't even like it when like I cry. He's like, fix your face. Like, why do you look like that? And I'm like, man, like, so sadness really affects him, and kids, whether they're, neurotypical or neurodiverse, like they can sense sadness, and that is a stigma, where like a lot of autistic folks, they lack empathy, and they read personalities a little bit differently, and it's true. But again, like, it's a spectrum, so every autistic body has very unique traits or different traits. And so with my son, he definitely can read my face. He definitely understands. He doesn't understand my sarcasm, but he understands, like, but he understands like when I'm distraught, when I'm frustrated. And because I'm a designer and a photographer, I wanted to be able to just tap into that side where I could, where it's like, yeah, like there's client work and there's work that I'm doing for all these other communities, but how am I able to take all these really intricate vulnerabilities and just create a beautiful like expression, something that like can be like archived as legit Black representation. And it's amazing because it's archived at the Met, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in their special collections. Like my publishers, Homey House Press, they have like a few books that are archived in the Met as well. And so it was amazing that the book was added to like the canon. The Knox Rocks photo zine was added to that canon. It's in the library at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. So it's really cool that it's like accessible. And I wasn't necessarily like, oh, well, my book has to be reviewed by the New York Times and it's got to be reviewed by like this. It wasn't really about that. It was really, if it could be in an accessible place like a library, to me, that means that it's like seen as like this historical archive of cultural ephemera. Like, that means the world, because then folks can be able to say, hey, what does a Black and brown autistic neurodivergent family look like? And just poems, thoughts, and photos. Like, what does like a true representation, honest representation look like? That's not tied to any organization, that's not tied to any advertisements or sponsors, but that was just written like in a basement. Like, literally, I'm like in my basement cranking out stuff. You know, the photos are, it's like a really beautiful reflection of when he was, you know, first born up until he turned 5 years old. And it's just like a really and now he, you know, he's able to like use it to have conversations with folks. We've been in workshops with other autistic people and other autistic families, and we're able to present it and talk about it so that the kids feel like, oh wow, like that's me, like I see like a reflection of who I am.
That is so powerful and beautiful. Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing that with us, sharing your art with us and your son with us through this book. How can folks support you, the Black Disabled Lives Matter movement, and become allies to the movement as well? Just to close out.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really cool stuff coming up. Again, as I mentioned, on July 26th is the 30th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act. So various folks on a national and global level are doing all different types of virtual actions. So just make sure that you follow the hashtag ADA30 in color.
Gotcha.
And then hashtag ADA30. So there, and so basically on the 25th, the 24th and 25th, it's just like a BIPOC celebration, and it's actually called Decolonizing Dreams. And the National Alliance of Multicultural Disabled Advocates are putting a 2-day virtual event together that's going to be really amazing. And all of these cool disability justice speakers are coming to like help to continue the dialogue. And folks can tune in, and they want to be able to actually have like a live participatory mural on the 26th. So we're still looking for locations, still trying to narrow down like an accessible space, because we want for folks to feel like they can come and participate and paint a name, paint the fist, you know, all under social distancing guidelines. Like we take that very seriously. So at the end of the day, if it's like a team of like 3 people that are putting the mural together, that's cool. But then we also want to be able to make sure that people feel like they can come and participate, whether it's for 5 minutes and then they leave, or whatever they feel led to do.
Thank you, Jen. And I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but Jen is Baltimore based. So we're a little far from each other, but we're still in solidarity with you. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time today and for joining me.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you holding space for me to be able to, like, you know, just rap and to talk about it all, because it's a lot of really beautiful things going on amidst of all of the heaviness. So
of course. Thank you. Folks, you can follow, support, and learn more about Jen and her art and neurodiversity movements by visiting her website at jenwhitejohnson.com. And you can follow her on Instagram at JTKnoxRocks. The link is on the bottom, and the way you spell it is on the bottom. Open BxRx. We'll be right back.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash your hands frequently, learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
Welcome back to Open BxRx. Enfoco Inc. presents Asymptomatic Systematic, a virtual exhibition creating a space for personal expression as each photographer navigates the experiences happening during COVID-19. Joining us now to share more are Oscar Rivera, curator, and Kasey-Lynn Rodriguez, aka Casinator, one of the featured artists. Welcome. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Of course. So the first thing I want to get into, of course, is learning how Enfoco has navigated through COVID-19 and also remote work during this time.
Yeah, so it's been a challenge. We've been forced to work remotely. I just moved back to the city from 10 months in Puerto Rico. So figuring out how to get everyone on the same time schedule and transition all of our programmings into a digital format has been a difficult undertaking, but it's been one that's really allowed us to enrich our relationship to our communities and our artists.
Right. And getting into the newest exhibition, Asymptomatic Systematic, can you just tell us more about that? You're the curator, and how you like assemble the artists that are behind it as well.
Of course. So Asymptomatic Systematic is actually a companion piece to the Pandemic Response Forum that I organized in the latest issue of Nueva Luz. So I tapped 10 artists from our pool from the fellowship. Everyone that applies, we keep those records, and whenever we need to put our ear to the streets, those are the first people we go to. We've actually had my eye on Kasey for a very long time. And so I reached out and asked a couple people to share their experiences in navigating the pandemic with me. And their statements were published in the issue, and their work was then transferred over to the sister exhibition.
Right. And Kasey, we're glad to have you here, and I'm glad that we have this open space to discuss your pieces that you have in this series. Can you tell us about the pieces that you presented to the show? They explore motherhood during a pandemic. I just want to learn more about it. The pictures are beautiful, and the first thing that comes to mind for me is elegance. But then, of course, you have a mask on, so that just completely changes the story.
Yeah. So with the pandemic, I think it really brought like my level of motherhood kind of extra. Now it was more, when I first had my son, it was kind of like, okay, I can't have a lot of people around him because he's brand new and all these other things. And I was also dealing with postpartum depression also. So it was a kind of a lot. And then I finally was able to move out of that a little bit and get back into a routine around December, January. And then with having the pandemic hit, everything just kind of then stopped. So the groove that I got back into of going back to church and kind of getting back into who I was before being a mom kind of got halted again. And then it was like, okay, now we have to stay home. Now I have to be extra careful with the newborn, like all these other things. Because when the pandemic hit, he was about 5 months, going on to 6 months. Wow. Now he's going to be 10 months this weekend. So it's kind of like, you know, all this time, kind of, it just changed. I never thought that the first year of being a mom was going to be so scary. I think, I mean, parenthood already, being a mom, all these things are kind of already kind of like frightening a little bit your first year, but it took a big toll on me. So creating this art kind of brought in a new element to like everything that was kind of happening. So when I got the email about the open call, I was like, oh, great. Now I can kind of put together this idea that I had and everything. And we just set it up at home and we just went there from there. And the thing too is that it was inspired by Victorian era portraits. So the whole idea about family dynamics and things like that, who are you being quarantined with? All these other kind of things kind of were playing into what I produced. And I think also because my family, like my aunt, my mom, were essential workers. So it was really hard for me too, having like them home and helping me with the baby and things like that, or them, you know, not having to work as much or hours being not as crazy. All these other things just kind of changed dramatically. So I feel like incorporating that whole family dynamic and things like that as well, and then including the masks where now, you know, now this is how we have to go out. Now we have to be careful. Like, do you have gloves? Do you have this? And it's kind of like, I would have never thought that I would have to have thought about these things when I had my son in September and how everything played out this year.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that and giving us a glimpse into your life through COVID-19, which is something that a lot of us aren't aware of, you know, like I'm not a mom of a baby that was just born, you know what I mean? So I don't know, but I see in the photos that you gave us that story. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And Oscar, you also have work in the show as well as being a curator. Can you tell me just about digital exhibitions and also how you offer a space for escape from the comfort of our homes during this time, and about your work on Notes on Paradise? That's the name of your series in this show.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, digital exhibitions, they offer us an opportunity to put together a package and deliver it right into the homes of our communities and our artists. And it gives us a wider audience. It allows us to highlight more artists for longer times. We get to engage with people in a different but equally as meaningful way. So it's been a really enriching experience for me. In regards to my series, Notes on Paradise, it was born out of my longing and desire for community and family and finding a home. I moved to Puerto Rico in September. I got married. I figured we're going to start fresh. It's going to be great. I was not prepared for the realities of a post-Maria Puerto Rico and what that meant in regards to infrastructure, politics, just dealing with that. And then we had sort of every 3 months, a new new challenger stepped into the ring. Earthquakes, the pandemic, anti-LGBT legislation. So there was a lot of things for me to unpack externally, not even including my own personal challenges. So Notes on Paradise is my way of navigating through all of that, and it's purposefully black and white to combat the romantic idea of the Caribbean.
Right.
Every time we think of Puerto Rico, we see Viejo San Juan, we see the bright colors, the flowers, a rich environment, and that isn't always necessarily the reality. And it certainly wasn't for me. So that's what Notes on Paradise is.
Thank you so much, Oscar. I was just going to ask about the black and white, if it was intentional, and apparently, yes, of course. And I just wanted to say they were like hauntingly beautiful to look at. So thank you for that. The next thing I wanted to explore is, of course, the Enfoco Photography Fellowship, and this year's 2020 Fellowship winners featured works in Your Reflection, This Memory. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. So it was curated by Julia Mata, and this cohort of fellows is actually one of my favorites. We've got 10 very important artists delving into really deep and thematically rich work. Oftentimes our fellows, they are really hyper-focused on communities that are sort of pushed to the outer edges of societal focus. And some of my favorites from this cohort are Odette Chavez-Mayo and Antonio Johnson, who are both both photographing incarcerated folks. And I think that it's super important to really provide rich context for those communities and really tackle a lot of, I guess, the stereotypes and the notions that come with incarceration. And I think that it's really important for us to show work that engages with all communities at all times, especially when we're living in this moment that we're living in. The show was originally scheduled to be hosted at Bronx Art Space, and then the world ended and we had to transition it to our website. But I think that helped it a little bit. We're providing free access to really high quality arts, and it's not bound by physical space anymore, and it can go wherever it needs to go.
Right. Thank you for that. Now that we're talking about that, the bounds of social media and how we can extend our work and be creative online. Kasey, you're also photographing marches here in the Bronx. Can you discuss the power of media and photography in movements like today with the Black Lives Matter movement and civil unrest in our borough?
Yeah, definitely. Well, my work has always kind of been the documenting of, I guess, everything community-wise, but also a lot of the social things that people don't realize happens in the Bronx, or what is generalized in the Bronx too, about like how we live here. It's a little bit not as nicer as it would be in other boroughs, or people don't realize that still the Bronx is like one of the poorest congressional areas, like boroughs, you know what I mean? So I think my work has always been to uplift the Bronx despite these stereotypes and things like that. And I feel like when I went, I photographed the protest at Hunts Point. That's in my neighborhood directly. So I know my neighborhood gets affected by this, and the fact that the community came together to go to the Hunts Point train station and was able to chant out the names of George Floyd and all those who were killed by police brutality and everything as well. And, you know, it's a thing of finally communities are able to like come together in ways that it's not like selfish things or anything like that. But I mean it more in the sense of coming together to be able to fight for one thing that we can all agree on actually happens to us in our own neighborhoods and in our own backyard. So being able to be a part of that was amazing. It was very surreal to be surrounded by young people who were also talking in the crowd about how their lives have been affected by police violence or violence in general. And it's insane the fact that even our younger, like the youth, like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm only 28, but hearing somebody who was about 14, 15 years old talking about how she has seen somebody, you know, get hurt in front of her or die, or there's a bunch of things that it's like, wow, like you don't realize that this also affects so many other people in so many different ways. We all have different experiences. So I feel like being able to photograph this and being a part of it gives them a voice. It doesn't put me in the focus of what's happening. It puts them more in the focus. Whereas sometimes, like, or if I wasn't around to photograph that, who do we know that would be able to photograph it and tell this story of what's going on in our own neighborhood? I commend my friends who are photographers also, who are literally going out every day and doing the other marches and the protesting and stuff like that. And I also feel like too, if I didn't have my son and stuff like that, I would be doing so much more, you know? But the thing is that being able to, I guess, put it out there and social media and media in general is so powerful because you can voice your opinion. You can say, you know, this is what I was told. This is what I learned. This is what I heard and stuff like that, instead of just kind of giving a baseless opinion or something that, you know, anybody could just say the sky is green, you know what I'm saying? And then people will be like, really? Like, I didn't know, you know what I mean? So it kind of puts it out there of like, you know what, this is the stuff that I heard. We have to listen to the people in our communities, and these are the things that are going on. And especially with Black Lives Matter and all these protesting that are happening is needed. It's like super important to have and to hear these stories and to know what is going on, because we can't just be in a bubble, you know what I mean? So photographing this, being out there and everything has been super important and so emotionally connecting too, in a way, because it's finally like bringing out so much more than just, you know, so much more than just what we're hearing on our news or whatever. It's actually knowing and seeing and being a part of something that's bigger than us, you know?
Yep. Because a lot, if not all of the protests that were organized in the Bronx were peaceful, you know, and then one of them turned into violent because the police attacked the organizers and the protesters. But it's important to have photographers like you, Kasey, who are on the forefront and also capturing the true stories. So thank you. Just to wrap up, I wish I had more time with you both. But Oscar, I also wanted to discuss how people can get in touch with Enfoco, view the virtual exhibition, and donate and all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So you can reach us at enfoco.org. If you have any questions for us, you can reach out to us on Instagram at @enfocoinc_ or info@enfoco.org. You can also find the latest issue of Nova Luz that has the pandemic response forum on enfoco.org.
Thank you both so much for your time today, and congratulations on the opening reception.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Folks, that's all for our show today. Thank you for tuning into BxRx. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, wishing you and your family safety and wellness now and always. Until next time.